Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be tuning in from. Jason, this is episode 86, LinkedIn live stream 86 for us, now going on almost exactly 2 years. How you
Yeah.
doing today?
Doing really well. And the rumor is that I am warmer than you are up in Colorado today. So that's a win.
Yeah, we're just, well, actually, I can't complain. It's freezing right now, so the temperature has definitely climbed up a little bit. But what we want to do is just encourage everyone, wherever you might be tuning in from, be sure to give us a shout out in the comment section. This is our world map, and we'll refer to it again throughout the live stream. We've got technical support in Romania. We've got our producer in United States in Georgia. Yep, there's Romania right there. And over in the United States right now, we've got Jason in Texas. I'm in Colorado. Our producer's in Georgia, like I mentioned. But Jason, how come Arizona's lit up?
I have no idea. Why would we let anyone from Arizona on this call? Oh, wait. It's because Edward's joining us. Edward, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks, folks. Pleasure's all mine.
Hey, for everyone out there, this is our great colleague, Edward Watson, located in Arizona. He's, as you can see there, Senior Product Marketing Manager. Edward, tell us a little bit about what you look after at Veeam.
Yeah, so right now it's basically spreading the good news about Microsoft 365 backup, and that's obviously an incredible market for us, and really looking forward to sharing some and really educating some folks on the call today.
Yeah, brilliant. And so maybe for those that aren't familiar, I mean, certainly we're all familiar with at least components of Microsoft 365. But I've been looking at a little bit of the research lately, and some of the numbers are pretty spectacular. I mean, if we just think about the Microsoft platform, how many deployments there are, and certainly the pandemic has fueled some of that. But maybe talk to us a little bit about that, because some people may know a little about M365, probably use a little of it, maybe some power users out there, but it's far more deployed than I thought.
Yeah, in fact, to date, and Microsoft haven't come out with really very recent numbers, but we estimate it's well above 300 million Microsoft 365 users today. And for Teams, that number has only increased. It's gone from 250 million in the past 6 months, shot up to 270 million. So 8% growth over the past 6 months. So definitely not seeing like the 100% growth or the 50% growth we saw during the pandemic, but certainly still continuing to grow and catching up with those Office 365 users as well.
Yeah, outstanding. And so, Jason and I have been writing and speaking a little bit on this live stream, in fact, about M365. We used to call it O365, but whatever people may refer to it as, because sometimes acronyms have a pretty long half-life with them. So whichever parlance you use, Jason, there's no doubt that as a service, but particularly the email component of M365 is consumed by a great number. Although to Edwin's point, Teams on the rise for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly M365, O365, X365, pick any letter you want in front of it. It is truly probably it is the poster child of what SaaS really ought to look like for so many. And Dave, you and I have both been in IT for 30 plus years each. And I think for as long as we've been in the space, mail server was one of those truly first foundational platforms that you put into the environment. And the fact that these days most people are not running on-prem Exchange, right? They've thrown in a credit card and all of a sudden now their mailboxes just magically work better than they ever have before is utterly IT transformational.
Yeah, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but in my opinion, and love to get your guys' thoughts and encourage everyone out there, drop a comment or a question into chat as well. But while M365 may be the most ubiquitous as a service app, there are some unique characteristics to it that we'll get to. But why don't we transition now? We've got a couple slides up. What makes O365 a little bit different, and why might you want to protect it? Because let's do a little myth busting here. Both of you guys, here we ask a question, and many of you may have seen on our previous streams. This is from some of the research we've done in the past, but this is issuing, what are your primary reasons for protecting M365? Choose all that apply. I'm sorry, Jason, I slipped into our DPR trend. This is by persona, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, so one of the things that we did differently in this particular research, this actually comes out of our Cloud Protection Trends 2021 report. And we'll make sure to drop that link in just a few seconds into the chat. But one of the things that was interesting about that report was we really wanted to understand the differences between what IaaS admins think, what SaaS admins think, in this case about 365, versus what backup admins think, those folks that are responsible for backing up the rest of the data. Because I think there was kind of a hypothesis for the last several years that the recycle bin is good enough, but you don't have to back up SaaS; it's natively durable, right? And so by asking both SaaS admins and backup admins on this slide, I love the fact that I think SaaS admins actually probably got it more right, even than the backup admins, which is cool because they know the SaaS platform better than the backup admins do. Edward, you've probably been spending some time preaching off of this slide. Why don't you break down what you liked about it?
Yeah, so I think, and you really hit the nail on the head there, Jason, that, for some reason, SaaS admins understand these recognize the risks even more so than the backup. But for me, accidental deletion, this really just confirms that even something as common and as simple as user error is just a pain point for IT admins. And I think we're going to touch on one of the V6 features later that really speaks to that. But again, we see things like, just simple user error, malicious users or internal threats continue to be a pain. Or even, what Microsoft provides natively just isn't meeting my needs. I need better restoration capabilities, more granularity for restores. Maybe I have compliance reasons. These are all, reasons that we thought were the reasons, but really they're confirmed here. And it's really good to see data like this that support the reasons IT admins recognize risks.
Yeah, and I'm just going to pile on a little bit because we want to make sure. Look, we're a valued Microsoft partner. In fact, I spent 6 years walking those hallowed halls up in Redmond for a while, so we're not bashing the recycle bin. But there's a difference between, hey, I overwrote something or I deleted something a few minutes ago, I'm going to go pull it back. That's what the recycle bin is for, right? And then there's a difference with legal hold where it's like, okay, I'm going to freeze this mailbox, which is great if you're just talking about the 6 folks on the CXO leadership team, but you're not going to freeze the mailboxes for 4,500 employees, right? So there is still a need somewhere between longer than the recycle bin and less invasive than legal hold. That's where backup lives. And I love the fact that SaaS admins who live and breathe this platform understand that. Frankly, there's probably a little education the backup admins need out of this one, but yeah, I think that's pretty spot on, and it certainly shows that importance along the way. Dave, this is a space that you've also been covering for quite a while. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I had the same reaction that I think collectively the respondents got it right. What we've noticed, Jason, in research is those that are closer to the activity, they tend to be a little more aware of all the challenges, all the things that can go wrong, all of the reasons to protect. What I like about this is the non-traditional, meaning the SaaS admin, but non-traditional backup person says he or she that, hey, there's a lot of things that can happen. Much like we've seen with the rest of the data center, it applies to as a service as well. It's not typically just one thing you have to worry about. It's a whole host of things that can take down your environment. And I do see we've got a question. Maybe I'll pitch this one out to Edward. It's a licensing question. But Rashid asks, how do you license Veeam for Office 365 or M365? And after you answer, we'll hit the world map, Edward.
Yeah, fantastic. Excellent question, by the way. So we license on a per user per month basis. So similar to how Microsoft 365 is licensed. We start at a very reasonable $1.60 per user per month. Really great discounts if you want to commit between the 3 to 5 year range. So again, great question.
I was going to go with $1 billion per year.
Right.
You got some spy bond stuff behind you, so I
Sure.
just had to kind of throw that in. But your answer is probably better.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Let's take a look at where people might be tuning in from. I'm going to go see over here. Looks like what we've got in the United States is Atlanta, Tennessee, California, Arizona, another person from Arizona with Edward, Michigan. We've also got, if we look over on the European front, United Kingdom and a few areas there, France. Nice. And we've got Brazil, Algeria, Nigeria as well.
I
And
always love it when Brazil is in the house. Just that big old chunk of the planet turns green. Makes my heart happy.
and Iran, I don't want to leave anyone out, so thank you for tuning in from there. Oh, maybe a follow-up for you, Edward, from Rashid. The question is, do you mean that O365 backup is continuous protection of 24/7?
Continuous protection. Well, again, it depends how often you back up, right? I think it goes back to the old RTO RPO question. We can back up as often as every 5 minutes. So that for many organizations meets their needs, their requirements, and hopefully you find that competitive as well.
So that's similar to the question we used to get many years ago about, how often would you protect Exchange, right? So, back in the old days, there was CCR, LCR, and then later there was DAG. And so certainly if you're just thinking about things like mitigating against data corruption, that's what transaction log style mechanisms are for. Yes. And M365 natively handles that because there is still some JET and some backend database behind the scenes. But that's different than, do I need previous versions of my data? And that's really where backup comes in. And I want to always make sure that we think through that, right? So when you think about continuity, there's typically two things you have to think about. There's geo-continuity, which is where if your mail dies in Phoenix, Arizona, you can get your mail from Dublin, Ireland, and you don't care, right? So that's a redirect that happens in real time. There's data corruption that's handled by the transaction log, and then there's all the previous version iterations. So continuous is relative on that curve. It depends on what you're solving for.
Right.
And this might be a good time. Actually, let's jump into our next slide, if we could, in terms of, what's the state right now? We've got a poll question that we'll come back to in a little bit, the results of a poll question. But here what we're seeing is from our data protection report, over half at 55% of the businesses, and that's coming from a sample of almost 1,000 responses, they're not currently protected. Maybe decompose that a little bit, guys.
Man, I love this slide. And I guess the main reason I love it is because look at that 1 year shift, right? There's so many organizations that when they first started, again, it really comes back to the fact that for too many organizations, they assume that M365 protects itself. And just in 1 year to see that shift where nearly twice as many organizations said, holy crud, the recycle bin is not enough. I think is super exciting along that way. But Edward, when you look at this, when you're thinking about the organizations that have not chosen to protect yet, why do you think that is?
A lot of it, I think, comes just down to education or maybe good enough technology. We're still seeing so many organizations leveraging things like the recycle bin, litigation hold. A lot of the E3, E5 components especially lend themselves to thinking you're covered, thinking you're protected. And again, this is not, as you mentioned earlier, a Microsoft Bash session. We complement Microsoft. Look, we complement Microsoft 365. We augment the solutions. And again, if you want a copy stored separately you can recover from, we offer that. But again, it's making sure organizations just have that fundamental understanding of the difference.
Brilliant. And let's see, we've got a couple comments. Tim Smith also chimes in. Jason, in addition to what you were saying, says Veeam 365 also protects the hidden, meaning permanently deleted items in a folder. So even if an item is deleted in a mailbox, the backup that night will still grab and protect that message. And I don't want to mispronounce anyone's name, so I won't, but I'll definitely pass on the question. So could you say that Veeam helps in compliance with GDPR and data protection?
So I love compliance, but I'll let Edward go first.
Yeah, so this isn't necessarily a GDPR solution, right? But again, it augments things like legal. It augments things like the GDPR process. So again, these are not necessarily legal and compliance tools, but they can certainly help you meet compliance needs in a more timely manner.
Spoken like a true marketeer. Let me
well, yeah, brush that up for me, Jason.
I'm a regulation guy, so I did BCDR in one of my last slides, and so it's important to make sure that you understand that you're never going to buy a software product that once you bought the product and successfully implemented it, you automatically get a check mark that says yes, I am now compliant with this reg. Right. But I have yet to find a data protection reg, whether it's GDPR, whether it's SOX in the United States, HIPAA, which is all about protection and preservation of and portability. There's a lot of P's in HIPAA along the way. But every one of them has some kind of a mandate around long-term retention. Right. The other part of that mandate certainly is aware that if a lawyer says you got to hold data for 7 years, I promise you, if you're doing that right, another lawyer will come in and say at 7 years and a day, I need you to delete it. Right. So as soon as you get done fixing data retention, you're going to have a data destruction problem. GDPR certainly exacerbates that one exponentially. But I don't know of a reg yet where data retention is not there. And please hear me, M365 does not satisfy that level of data retention, even when you go to like E3 and E5. So you are going to need backup from that. And I just pile on to that. I think we're going to talk about retention in a minute, but also remember when you start thinking about things like ransomware, having a separate set of credentials to have that whole separation from a compromised credential point of view becomes really, really important when you're talking about compliance type mandates and audit logging. But let's go back to retention for a second. Edward, you've got some stuff you want to share for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is quite frankly a really great view of what we're seeing for data being held, and up to 3 years, we see quite a substantial number there. Up to 5 years starts trailing off a little bit for both backup and SaaS admins. Still 10% up to 7 years for SaaS admins, up 10% up to 10 years. I mean, and even forever, 10%. I mean, this is phenomenal. And I can only imagine this increasing in the future. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, now's the time, I guess, Jason, I'll chime in with my usual comment when we talk about this solution, and that is, everyone, one of the reasons that I think people understand that they need to protect it, but also one of the reasons that people should be protecting it, is that they typically have come, at least at this point, from an on-prem version of Exchange, and now they've gone to the cloud or as a service. So they may still have very specific ideas around retention or granularity of recovery because they're used to what they had the solution on-prem themselves. Like Jason mentioned, implementing availability groups and all that kind of good fun. They're happy to be out of that, but they want the service. The other thing, though, Edward, that I think is key to understand is this is literally one of the few SaaS applications where if you have a copy of the data, you can actually do something with it.
Now, that's a really good point. So, just the fact that you went from a server hosted infrastructure to a service hosted infrastructure does not change your regulatory requirements. Right. And so if you had a long-term regulatory requirement, that's there. The problem is that like you do something like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow or something like that. It's not like you can rehydrate that and stand up your own Salesforce instance running on-prem. Right. Doesn't work like that. One of the things I love about the 365 implementation is that if you know Exchange, if you know SharePoint, it's the same recovery tools, right? It's still mailboxes. It's still document lists. It's still items. You can still recover it that same way. So all of a sudden, we see these retention mandates as they apply to things like e-discovery, right? Or data mining, so you can actually get better value out of that data and unlock historical records. You can do that with this because of how that data is self-described.
Yeah, and I do want to give a quick shout out here. We ran a LinkedIn poll, and so now this is what some of our probably people on the stream responded with earlier, and that was around how are they currently backing up or how do they view M365? Pretty interesting split here. About a quarter built-in capabilities, meaning we rely on the cycle bin, right, Jason? And then a quarter say, we don't back it up. So if you add that, this is pretty consistent, Edward, with the data we saw before, meaning about half aren't doing anything over and above what's coming from the platform, and a little over half are using third party.
And ideally, we'd see people in the first row there eventually make their way to the third row, meaning they finally understand that what is built in doesn't necessarily meet their criteria for what a backup is defined as.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a great transition. Actually, this is part where I'll probably turn over to you, Edwin. Take us through a little bit of Veeam backup for Microsoft 365. And I've been holding a question that I'll hit you with that's come in from someone watching as well.
Yeah, sounds good. So, we've really become quite a bit of a leader in the space over the past 5 years since the inception of the solution, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. And a few points here, really, Dave. Really what we're all about is eliminating the risk of losing access to Microsoft 365 data. We've talked about accidental deletion, security threats, other various needs. What we really do is put the control back into the customer's hands. A few differentiators here for Veeam is really we allow you to back up to any location. You probably have heard Veeam say, we don't have a cloud, we don't have our own storage. We'll allow you to back up really anywhere you choose. We work with some of the largest, most trusted providers in the world to really offer you great storage flexibility. Many of the other guys don't offer that, right? They might force you into their own storage or maybe there's some storage lock-in scenarios that can happen there. But again, freedom of flexibility of storage. Restore options. That's another massive strength of Veeam. And we're going to cover that in a little more detail later on. But really, no backup is complete without a restore, right, guys? So ultimately, making sure that you have, for really any data loss scenario, the ability to recover the way your business requires, absolutely critical. And then lastly, we've been talking a lot about compliance already today. We allow you to use some very powerful e-discoveries, these explorer technologies that we have to essentially go in, find that needle in a haystack for your HR compliance officer, go in there and really explore very large data sets to make sure that you get the individual file or site back the way you need.
So I want to keep you on the mic and pull Jason in as well. Speaking of restore, just a couple slides to mention about restore. One thing that's brand new, as in really literally a couple days ago, handful of days ago, is this self-service restore portal. Jason, I'm sure you don't want to sit around and write a help ticket to get your data back. You want access to it when you want access to it. And that could be at 3 a.m. on the weekend. You don't want that to wait till Monday, do you?
Darn tootin' straight. And that's the Texas in me coming out. Yeah, so certainly one of the most exciting things when you're talking about user-based error. We talked about the recycle bin is not good enough, right? So we talked about that from the SaaS admin's perspective. We talked about that from the backup admin's perspective. No one's going to feel that more than the general user. And especially when you think about, and I love what Tim Smith mentioned earlier on, even when something is completely deleted, it's out of the recycle bin, it's out of the back end of the organization, secondary recycle bin, it's gone. And yet with the self-service portal, I can still pull that data right back again. Fantastic enablement for the general user, and it released some pressure from IT.
Yeah, brilliant. And I just want to mind numb everyone. We're not going to go through all these, but there are many different ways you can restore data. And this slide isn't meant to scare people that you have to know all 45 or even use all of them. But the point is flexibility. And around flexibility, I'm just going to hang on this slide for a moment, and you guys feel free to comment on it. But I do want to get a couple questions in, maybe to Edward. So do I need any additional requirements to the existing Veeam backup server version 11 to take the Office 365 backup? This is actually a really good one. I'm curious to see where you go. I know Jason and I want to pile on this too.
So not necessarily to my knowledge. I think for version 6, my advice would be, look, if you're already running a later version of the product, if you're already leveraging, say, object storage or Teams with version 5, I think this is a natural progression. I would urge, even if you're just simply deploying this from the start, I think version 6 is something we want to get in everyone's hands right away. So even if you're a first-time downloader of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, I would just urge you to go ahead and download version 6, the absolute latest version, if possible.
And I see we've got some peers jumping in there. Shout out to Jorge de la Cruz, one of my favorites out there. He's been answering some questions. Steven's been answering some questions. Jason, I want to hit you with the question, but also make a point. And while this may not be exactly what was asked, I think it's a good point to mention that you can deploy this Veeam backup for M365 solution, even if you're not running Veeam backup and replication on-prem. It's standalone. And in fact, almost a quarter, roughly 23, 24% of our users of this product actually are not running Veeam backup and replication, or at least they weren't at the time that they purchased it. So it's a standalone blade, but it shares connective tissue. It's just not a requirement. But now a question for you, Jason. This one came in from, and I'll try to pronounce correctly, Lelio. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. So security question, Jason. Could you hit this one that Lelio asked?
Let me scroll up. It was around what security issues facilitate good practices.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I'm going to pile on to what Dave talked about, how you can actually run a lot of our as a service products without requiring Veeam backup and replication, our flagship product, because what we often find is for a lot of organizations, you're still in your third or fourth year of warranty service provider jail. With some legacy backup solution that's on-prem. And yet, as you've modernized your production infrastructure and embraced not only Office 365, but Amazon and Azure class hosting as well, you don't have a solution because your legacy backup doesn't cover that. And so it's not uncommon that you would start a Veeam experience by running one of our modern products that's designed for as a service. So from a security perspective, one of the things that's really interesting is if you just want to back up an on-prem workload, basically most of the time you give the backup agent something which is roughly analogous to admin level credentials. Sometimes you might have a backup operator level credential, but that doesn't happen as often as it should from a best practice. I'm going to tell you, you want to configure backup for a Microsoft 365 environment, there are some very specific things that you enable in that service profile that you can and cannot do. It covers MFA. It covers making sure that you can protect the data without reading the data. There's a lot of security that goes into making sure that it's actually a very well-defined, secure backup of that. And also, I love the fact that if the only thing you're doing was M365 and you're using built-in tools, you probably have only one Microsoft login that's facilitating all that, which means if that credential gets compromised, yes, they can go in, wipe your production org, wipe your Azure Blob storage where your attention is, turn off your legal hold, and just laugh at you, right? And instead, you're using a separate set of credentials. You're storing that to a different Azure storage account or even back home. I back up my 365 environment to a little VM running in Dallas, Texas on-prem. So no matter what happens, if the cloud turns off tomorrow, I still have a copy of my data. So yeah, there's a lot of security bifurcation and separation that's enabled by these solutions. You'd also find that in our Azure and Amazon products as well. Definitely take a look at that. Defines the term best practice.
Great points. Edward, I want to give it over to you for one more shout out about one of the V6 capabilities we've got here about backup to low-cost storage. Everyone's trying to contain costs, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. And you know, that this kind of goes hand in hand with the slide we showed earlier about retention mandates, you know, and we can only see those increasing. And again, these were the two top requests, right? Self-service restore portal and look, guys, give me backup copy to low-cost object storage that I can consume. Glacier Deep Archive, Azure Archive. And that's actually in addition to a lot of the great object storage integrations we now have, Dave. AWS S3, we've had now a few years. Azure Blob, IBM Cloud, of course. And you can even deploy in the cloud, right, folks? You can go to Azure Marketplace. You can go to the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. Again, we're only continuing to expand our options. And in this case, you can actually create a backup copy directly from your existing object storage deployment. Again, leverage all the benefits of the cost and long-term aspects of object storage. And again, store your backup copy with an alternate provider from your main to avoid those lock-ins, any potential lock-in there. So again, great storage options. People have been waiting for this. We're excited that now we have the ability to create those backup copies. So 3-2-1 rule galore. This is how we make it happen, right? Continue to expand those options.
Awesome. Well, we had a lot of great interaction today. And we got a nice shout out from Lelio. And again, I hope we're not mispronouncing your name. If you want to know more about this solution, we're going to drop the URL in here. But here's a 7 critical reasons white paper that discusses why it might be important to back up M365. Goes into a little more depth than what we've covered here. Want to give a shout out as we look ahead this coming Friday show. We're going to double click further on Veeam Backup for 365 specifically. Then looking ahead 1 week from today, we're going to have our buddy Michael Cade on from Kasten talking about Kubernetes capabilities and open cloud native community updates. Week from Thursday is World Backup Day, 331. And we're going to have Kirsten, Ksenia, and some of our Veeam legends attending. And lastly, want to give a quick shout out. We're going back to conferences, although we will have a hybrid event. VeeamON will take place in May, both in person in Las Vegas, but also virtual. And I should remind everyone, guys, VeeamON is virtually no charge. If you want to tune in from home, 0 charge whatsoever. So with all that, Edward, thanks so much for coming and sharing. Obviously, it's a hot topic, a lot of great engagement, super awesome points on your part, Jason. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next stream.